Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today is a very special guest, somebody I've wanted to get on for a very, very long time. He's, of course, a musician, a composer, a songwriter, the legendary WWE entrance theme creator, Mr. Jim Johnston. Jim, welcome to the two-man power trip. How you doing?
Thank you, John, for having me. It's good to be here today.
What is going on in your world? Like, what have you been up to?
Um, a lot of different things. When you do something for 32 years, it's interesting transitioning out of it because human beings tend to be creatures of habit, whether you want to or not. And if you're getting up every day and doing the same thing for 32 years, it takes a while to get out of the habits you've created. So that was, I mean, it wasn't shocking at all, but uh, it was attention getting the impact of making it a huge shift in your life, a right angle turn in your life. So, but I'm here in my studio. I've never left my studio. I write music every day. Um, I have largely been just taking time to work on music that I've wanted to work on for so long, but I never had time because the whole thing when I was with the when I was at WWE, it was a beyond a 24/7 job. It was consuming 365 days a year. Because, as I'm sure you know, other than the news, it's really the only TV entity that uh, doesn't have an off season. It just keeps going. The day after WrestleMania always tended to be busier than WrestleMania because storylines change and people
Yep.
change, and guys who were in a tag team are now individuals and they need new music and new costuming, new vignettes, and so you just get to a never stopping thing. So it's been absolutely great to get back to being able to come into the studio and work on whatever I want to work on and not be uh, this is my current 20 long to-do list that's due tomorrow afternoon.
When you were there and the 32 years is over, is that one of the things that you wanted to part ways or they wanted to part? Like, how did that all kind of happen with, because like you said, 32, I mean, that's a long time there,
Yeah.
3 decades over.
Um, yeah, it for about the last 4 or 5 years I was there, things got really political in a bad way, and which in a bad way. Um, and finally, things just degraded, and Vince fired me basically. I mean, he put it in terms of I'm not renewing your contract, but that's what it means.
Felt like so many guys that were there, like you were there for so long, like Tony Chimmel, Mike Chioda, Steve Lombardi. It was weird. It's like all those guys of 30 plus years all of a sudden gone. It definitely, I mean, it's got to be a, not a shocker, but I mean, it's a culture change for sure.
Yeah, in my case, uh, referencing those last bad years, by the time it actually happened, uh, I knew it was coming, and I was looking forward to moving on. Or I'd actually been looking forward to moving on for a long time. But um, hindsight, I wish I had had the uh, foresight or really courage to just leave. But um, the force of habit just keeps you rolling.
When you're in the studio now, what kind of music are you writing?
All over the map. Songs, orchestral stuff. Really love orchestral stuff. It's because it's so broad and I don't know, just appeals to me. But of course, a lot of the stuff I did while at WWE was hybrid orchestral rock stuff. And it's interesting when I tell people what I do or did, uh, they immediately associate it with heavy metal music. And interestingly, heavy metal is I, one of the genres I did the least when I was there. If you think about entrance themes, there, or at least the ones I did, it was not too much heavy metal really. You know, you'd
No,
hear heavy metal in library music that was used for promos and stuff like that. But it's interesting that pro wrestling had such an association with that, and yet there really wasn't actually a whole lot of that kind of music in the product.
really only Ultimate Warrior that I can kinda think of off the top of my head that was like a kinda like a heavy metal kinda song.
I guess, but even that wasn't that heavy really.
No.
It was very frenetic and pounding, um, but it was, you know, it was very far from a Metallica track or something. But
Yeah.
you're right. You know, at least it's kind of in that ballpark.
When I think of you and I think of, like, that theme, in my head, it's like, how can you it's almost like genius level stuff, like, how do you look at the warrior, see him, and then go, "This would be his theme song," because everyone in their mind, when they think of him, that's the song that they would think of, but they wouldn't know how to create it, write it, think of it up, put it together, compose it, they wouldn't be able to do it, so it's like genius level stuff. It's like, "Oh my god," like, bump, and, like, that's how he runs to the ring, that's how he walks, that's how he shakes the ropes. Like, how do you come up with that?
I think you just answered the question for yourself. It's you look at the guy and it's, you know, he's like this on the ropes and he's running full tilt like this and he's moving like this. And so how does that translate to music? You know, just something, a frenetic pulse. And I think I literally picked up a guitar and just started dun 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 dun. Started with that, and the rest. It's interesting, John, when I at least, um, it's you ask, how did I think about it? You know, how did I come up with that? From my perspective, it's not really coming up with it. It's sort of some sort of bizarre. I guess it's as much a mystery to me as it might be to you, in that it just sort of it's much more organic than that. You know, you mess around with stuff and with a beat or a rhythm or a guitar, or I'll sit down at the piano and you just play. And particularly when I'd sit down at the piano, I would say 80% of the time that I would sit down to write something for person A, I would get an idea for person B. Or be like, oh, well, wait a second. That I like that. And that's literally the reaction. I'll be playing and it's almost like you were playing for me. And I said, like, oh, whoa, wait, John, I like that. Go back to what you were just playing. I like that. We could use that for this guy. So there's a certain out of body experience to the whole creative process that's certainly beyond my understanding, because stuff just really seems to arrive.
It's weird, right? Because to me, like Warrior, like as soon as you hear that song, just as a fan, immediately your reaction is like, I'm standing up, I'm cheering for this guy, just because it's like bump, and then like you immediately get like shooken in. So I'm not that musically inclined, so I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, that's crazy. Like you actually captured the guy, and like it's true to life. That's the theme song. You actually captured him through a theme. It's crazy to me.
It is sometimes, and a lot of times, hindsight, I have the same reaction. I'll listen and watch someone come to the ring, and I I see that it obviously works really well, but I have no recollection of saying like, oh, he's very frenetic, and he kind of moves at this tempo. Let me see, that's 105 beats per minute. So we probably want to, it's not nearly so analytical. It's just pure emotion, and I think the best things I ever have written are always that. The more it's just that you get the analysis out of the way and just write music. Just let it find it. It's almost like a faith issue. You have to sit down at the piano or pick up the guitar and you keep playing. And if you'll stick with the process and be faithful and not get up and get bored and walk away, something's going to show up. And it might not even be what you were looking for. As I said, sometimes you get an idea for somebody else, or I guess I have something in my mind a little bit when I sit down in the first place. I guess there's some reason why I would pick up a guitar versus sit down at the piano. But a lot of times I start over here, but end up over here, and I realized that this was wrong, and like this really works for the guy.
Do you have to, like, for Ultimate Warrior, for instance, like, do you have to watch him wrestle? Do you have to see him in the back?
Now,
Like,
watching people wrestle has never helped me in the least, because it's watching the way they. One of the biggest helps to me is watching them walk. Um, there's a tempo to how everybody walks, and there's a tempo to how everyone speaks. And if you get tuned into that, particularly in the pro wrestling world or just Hollywood entertainment world, there's a tempo to a person, and it's not just the speed at which they walk. It's do they walk with kind of their arms by their side still, or are they always kind of moving? And um, you know a guy like George Clooney is like a really cool guy, doesn't make fast moves. He's always well dressed. It's very smooth tempo. And, a guy like Jim Carrey, he walks in and he's moving around, and
yep.
his arms are going, he's a lot of different facial expressions constantly. It's a very different tempo. And that's, I think, one of the biggest clues for me. It's just sort of watching the person stand there, just getting a feeling. And then when you get really overt signs on top of that, in particular, and certainly Warrior is a great example of that, because once the starting gate is opened, he blows down the ramp like a cannon shot him. So
Yep.
I don't know. It like a lot of things in life, if you'll just take the time to observe, the answer reveals itself pretty quickly.
So did you like watch a lot of wrestling, or maybe watch them backstage, or did you watch
Never.
promos? Like,
I
no,
get it.
never.
I get no, I've never been a fan in the least. Um, and I think that really helped because, I wasn't, I wasn't a Mark kind of guy who just such an adoring fan. I think that would really skew your take on the characters, because it's it'd be like hiring someone who is a complete astronomy interplanetary UFO crazy person to write the score for ET. You know, they're going to be too involved with their love of ET and the story to stand back here and be thinking about what's the right music for this, because there are a lot of different ways of approaching music. A lot of music can come from two places. We watch it and hopefully it makes sense, whether it be an entrance theme or a film score. But there are two sources. The music can be, sometimes it's the guy's music. It's coming from the screen to us. And a lot of times the score is us. It's talking about our feelings and scoring how we're thinking about the storyline and the characters in the story. So those are things that all have to be taken into account as who's the music for here. You know, like in Warriors theme, clearly Warriors theme is Warriors theme. But even something like Stone Cold's theme. Yeah, it's Steve's theme. He's, you know, that theme says, I'm here to kick ass. But it also says for us, it's like a team thing. It's like, we're here to watch Steve come and kick ass. So it's like our theme with Steve. Warriors theme doesn't feel like that. It's we're watching him.
With Steve Austin too, that's another theme. Just awesome because even last year, I mean, he wrestled last year for WrestleMania. He was the main event of night one.
Yeah, you really? I
Yeah, oh yeah.
didn't even know that.
Yeah, he wasn't quote unquote wasn't supposed to. Then the guy Kevin Owens egged him on, and he ended up wrestling.
Probably
Really to promote his new beer that came out because he was drinking it like
right.
crazy.
Oh,
But so obviously you're not a fan, you wouldn't have known that. But yeah, he came back. But as soon as the glass breaks, the glass shatters, the crowd goes nuts. It's like almost like Pavlovian kind of
yeah.
like is
Frank,
that the reaction you were going for?
same thing with Undertaker Bell. Well, in the whole iconic intro sound thing, yeah, you're trying to come up with something that is truly an ID for that person. And yeah, for the guys that it works for, I mean, it's something I always tried to do because that's the whole point of the music. That was my job, is to come up with music and sound that brands these characters, that sort of burns these characters into your emotional soul. Because, and I'm sure it's probably something we're going to get to eventually, but it's why I think all the current music for doesn't work, because it doesn't. Again, it's exactly like scoring movies. In a story, if you don't care about the character, like if you don't care if they live or die, then you'll never really be in the story. You know, you may sit through the film, but it's like, it was okay. And the guy dies at the end, But, for fans of Steve Austin, they're truly pulling for him like a brother. It's an emotional attachment. And I think the music is largely responsible for that. Music is such an emotional medium, and that's not me trying to take undue credit. I'm speaking to the power of music. When music works, boy, it really works.
I totally agree.
People have experiences, the song that's playing the first time you kiss a girl, uh, music that coincidentally was playing when you found out your father died. You know, I mean, these events in life, you will never forget that piece of music. And if that music comes on the radio, you will be taken back to that moment in a millionth of a second. I mean,
So true.
it's it's an amazing process, and I think you're absolutely right on the money. It is a Pavlovian sort of still uh, not fully understood phenomena, but whatever is happening when our brains hear something and connect with an emotion and an event in our lives, it's genuinely striking.
It's crazy how much music can play a part in our lives. It's nuts. And like with wrestling, the perfect character, like Steve Austin, emotionally, we're connected with him. We love him. But the music is such a big part of the package because when we hear the music, we get excited because he is about to come out. If somebody else came out, you'd be like, "Oh, it's Austin's music." You know what I mean? Like, but you associate him with the music, and then your emotional response, you're invested in the guy. You love the guy.
I'll give you another example. Of course, this is within the context. I'm a pretty sappy guy, but um, one time I had to score. I got asked to score a vignette, not a vignette. It was I don't know. I think it was a cold open, maybe for a big pay-per-view, and you know those things, or at least they used to be fairly long form, maybe 2 minutes.
Yep.
And our executive producer had come to me and basically being as kind as possible was saying like, this is horrible. And they've tried to put, 50 different pieces of music to it from the library stuff to make it work. But, my fear is it's horrible. But unfortunately, the pay-per-view is tomorrow. So there's not time to completely cut a new package. Would you just try to see if you can do something with this? I understand if you come back and say, it's not doable. It's so horrible, the cut. Not going to happen. So I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. So in cases like that, when I'm scoring something, you put it up on the screen and just playing piano, you're trying to find something, a little connection, a voice that, oh, well, that kind of works, and then finds a little seed of something that works, and then you expand it. So I get set with my, actually I was using a synthesizer that sort of has a synthesized orchestra. So kind of impressionistically get a sense of the whole orchestra as you're playing. Because I knew it would be an orchestral piece, orchestral score to the thing. I start playing, John, and this is 5 minutes after watching it again and saying, like, there is no hope. This is one of the worst edits I have ever seen across my studio. I start playing something, and, something's happening. About halfway through, I start crying. Whatever was going on, it just completely worked. And that's the power of music and the mystery of it. And I'll add to that story. I had a friend, really close friend at work. After watching it the first time, and he used to be an editor, so I called him and I said, hey, would you just take a look at this? Maybe it's not as bad as I'm thinking, but I'd like to get a second pair of eyes on it just to see what I'm up against here. He watches it. He says it's the worst edit I've ever seen. That I can't believe they're even wasting time asking you to try to save the thing that's not savable. So when I did this rough thing, I always record it because a lot of times, you know, sometimes you do stuff and you forget, and it's like, oh, that was really cool, but you forgot what it was you did. So I had recorded it in sync with, as I played it. I called my friend back in and I said, okay, I feel free to say it's still the worst thing you've ever heard and seen, and he watched it and he goes, so that's a different cut, right? I said, no, exact same thing. He goes, no way. No way is that the same cut you just showed me. And that happened many, many times in my time there, where music is just so powerful. I mean, you have to find the right music, but once you do, it's like, wow, it's suddenly something that you think there's just no heart and soul to it, and turns out there's tons of heart and soul in there.
The power of the music there, big time. You
Yeah,
completely change everybody's perception just by changing the music.
yeah. It's a never-ending surprise to me.
Man,
But also the power of in that situation where, I just suddenly am tearing up because it goes from the worst thing I've ever seen to completely and utterly emotional. Um, and nothing changed. Nothing changed with the cut. Nothing changed in the room. Nothing changed with me. And it's, it's amazing. But somehow the whole business has lost track of that. It just, all the music sounds the same.
yep.
Uh, it, the music doesn't tell a story. It doesn't brand a character. It's just loud and busy and lots of sound effects. And I don't understand.
Why do you think that is? After all the success, I mean, they know the blueprint of the success with the music and the character and the package. Why do you think that is? Because you're so right. Current music, I don't know, like for the themes, like, you don't know which guy's coming out, which is a huge no-no because immediately you hear Warriors song, you know Warriors come out, so you get
Right.
excited.
Be in the kitchen cooking dinner and hear the TV in the next room, and you go, "Oh, Warriors coming out."
Yeah.
And now, good luck telling determining who's coming out. So, um, John, I think it's sadly, I think it's big corporations, too much money. Uh, they cut these big contracts that last for years and years, so things are guaranteed. So there's less incentive to, there's more incentive to just deliver the show than there is necessarily to make the product great. It seems to happen all the time that corporations get really big, and I hear it from many times from a lot of different people, the same basic comment, which is there is no way the CEO of this company ever actually used this product, because he would immediately fire 20 people and say, it took me 20 minutes to open the package. Are you kidding me? And I open it up and there are no instructions included, no batteries included. How is that possible? What are we doing here? We used to be a great company, and sadly, it just unless there is real unbelievable leadership at the top, it just seems to happen it seems to be part of the whole corporate cycle. They're hungry as they're creating themselves. They know that the only way to break through is to have the best product and the best cut, or if you're a service organization, the best customer experience, or you have to deliver the goods. But then suddenly, once you've made it and there's tons of money floating around and you're publicly traded, and I don't know. It's a bad dynamic. I see it a lot in so many corporations these days. General equality, and it also is what opens the door to other countries. These days, mainly China, really having an impact on our economy because they are worker bees, and they'll find a way to make it better and cheaper, and then they send it back here, and people buy it.
For sure. Definitely. And with the theme songs, it definitely seems like a little bit of cutting corners on some of these guys. Very cookie cutter, very generic. Like none of them are impactful. Not a good sign at all.
Well, yes, and also part of it is the the way music is created now. Unfortunately, with I don't know, it's music has sadly become more assembled than composed. It's like
Yep.
I grab these loops from this CD I bought, and I got some cool guitar licks that from another CD, and I can put them all together and kind of create this track. And um, that's not going to get it done. Hey, I'm old fashioned, but I guess, but um, I just don't think I think the results are obvious.
To me, it's almost like they're sounds and it's not necessarily music. You know what I mean? It's just like
Very much. The very
just noise. You're just noise you're hearing. Yeah.
well said. Yes, that's what it sounds like to me.
With that though, it's almost
Organized noise.
yeah. Yep. But it's almost like you're not helping the characters or the wrestlers by doing that. It's almost hurting them in the long run.
Could not possibly agree more. Yeah, I think it's so sad for the current crop of wrestlers because I hear it said. Well, I'm not hanging around with people who watch too much wrestling, but when I am, or when I talk from someone I knew at the company, um, when I was there, they're sort of like, I can't understand why we're not, there are no stars anymore. There are no Undertakers. There are no Stone Colds. Um, and they're probably in there, but they're being held back because I like to remind people that before he was Stone Cold, he was ringmaster. And, he didn't have a good character, and it was, I wrote the ringmaster theme, but it was, one interesting thing about writing music, if the character is lackluster, if the storyline is lackluster, if there's just kind of nothing dynamic about the person or their character as written, you can't overwrite the music and try to pull them up. It's a dance. I could write the greatest theme in the world, but if that guy or that girl can't dance to that theme, it's got to be a partnership. If you gave Stone Cold's theme to a guy who couldn't do what Stone Cold can do with his attitude, with his acting ability, with his way to work an audience, it would almost become parody. It would almost become a Gilbert type,
Right.
where you're poking fun at this guy is not tough. And that's why we gave him the toughest theme, to show how untough he is. He's a wimp. And I think that's happening, not as a conscious effort, but it's happening. And you're holding people back because they don't have a good story, they don't have a good character, and they don't have good music. And so, and making it worse, you have a bunch of guys in the same scenario, so they all become generic. It's just like generic wrestler 1, generic wrestler 2, and So
Yeah.
I don't know what fixes that. Um, I mean, better music would certainly help fix it, but who knows at this point because I don't, I'm not there, so I don't know if the guys are constantly complaining and it's like my character's going nowhere. These storylines stink. My music stinks. I do know that in that world, generally speaking, if you complain too much, you can get yourself fired,
Yep.
particularly when you're just one of 20 generic wrestlers.
Which they didn't help make ungeneric, you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
right, right. Because I mean, you can appear not that special,
Yep.
and even though maybe you are the next Stone Cold or the next Rock.
It's funny because I was thinking about Beyond the Mat, and you kind of do that with with Vader too. When you were talking about Vader, it's like, okay, how would this guy walk? Like, like we kind of were talking about with Warrior. Like, how do we make this like not generic and fit him? You know what I mean? It's just that was another perfectly done thing because it's like, dun, dun, like the way Vader is. He's a beast. He's a monster. He's from Boulder, Colorado. Just his song fit perfectly, which is so like not generic. Nobody else could have that theme. That's Vader's song.
Yeah, whatever happened to him?
He passed away, I want to say 4 years ago, I think it was.
Really? Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, he had a lot of heart issues.
Oh, really? Oh, jeez, that's too bad. Yeah, it's tough on those guys' bodies. Holy crow!
Yeah, and he was a big dude, he's a big guy.
Um, it's a tough life on the road, and what those guys do in the ring is always knocked me out when people would tell me, well, it's all fake. And I would just say, like, look, you know, the ring bounces a little bit, but that's actually more for sound than it is, it's definitely not a trampoline. I said, I'd be happy to go with you to a ring and no one will touch you. I just want you to fall down. Just fall down. Not let yourself down, just fall down. Let me know how it feels. Now imagine doing that off the off the post, doing a flip and land on your back. Or better yet, off the post, do a flip, land on your back, then have the next guy do the same and land on you.
Yep.
It's yes. Is it scripted? Yes. Is it fake? It is not fake.
No, there those guys are getting hurt. I
It's
always say to people, I'm like, Why would they have broken necks?" And
yeah,
it's like, it's legit, come on.
yeah, and it's it's amazing athleticism. So many times over the years we'd have NFL player visit or something because they're fans or NBA guys, and they'd always be curious about getting in the ring and jumping off a rope or something. As soon as they got there, they'd be like, "I'm not doing this. I'm not. I'll kill myself."
I was talking to one of the greatest MMA fighters ever, and he said to me, "I rather do MMA than wrestling." He said because he did some wrestling in Japan. This Boss Rutan, just legendary fighter. He did some in Japan. He goes, I don't want to do this. He's like, and even when I'm practicing the moves, I'm getting hurt. He's like, this is too much. I'm going back to MMA. I was like, wow, one of the like legit tough guys. He couldn't handle wrestling or didn't want to handle wrestling. Crazy.
It's 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 a tough deal, and you got to really love it to do it. But the guys get banged up for sure. But I don't know if there's a way around it.
No, definitely not. But with wrestling, you said you were never a fan, never got into it. So how back in basically the mid '80s do you get into WWF and like how do you get in with Vince and worked it? Because you said you weren't a fan, you never watched.
You like sushi. I there really weren't. There was one sushi bar in the town I live in. It had 6 seats. There, sushi was a completely unknown thing on the East Coast. It was known a little bit in LA at the time. I tried it in LA, fell in love. So I was a regular at this place, but because there are only like 5 or 6 seats at this one little bar in the corner of a Japanese restaurant, which is otherwise all cooked food, um, it was like going to your regular Friday night bar in a little town bar, and you'd see the same people there all the time, a
Yep.
real regulars hangout. I we you'd occasionally chat with other people you'd see there, and one guy that I chatted with came in one night and just said like, "Hey, didn't you say that you write music or something about music?" And I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Yeah, I got asked by my boss to prepare a video presentation for a cable TV convention, and I can put the video together, but I have no idea how you put music to it. Would you be interested in helping out?" And I did. Put music on it, Vince heard it. I went with a guy to play it for Vince. Um, this was, this was very soon after Vince bought the company from his dad. So he was, it was a little suite of offices on one floor, and like his office was in one corner, Linda's was in another, and this friend of mine, Brian Penry's, was the art director, and he had an area. I mean, it wasn't like you walk into this place like, oh my God, this is a big operation.
Right.
This is like a little tiny startup company. And we played it for Vince. Loved the video, loved the music. He and I are chatting it up, and he said, "What else do you do?" And I probably lied through my teeth and said, "Oh my God, anything, everything, you name it, I do it." So he asked me to do a few other things, and I did that, and then things quickly turned into a 24/7 proposition. However, something I always liked and was always honored by Vince, never even questioned. Uh, until the company went public many years later, Vince and I always operated on a handshake agreement. We never had anything on paper. And
Wow. Huh.
he always treated me well and honorably, and both of us hated the idea because once they went public, the lawyers swoop in, and it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? We, we, we can't have this guy that's a pretty important piece of the puzzle and he could just walk out the door because somebody else gives him a better offer. You've got to get the guy under contract. Uh, so
Yeah.
from there on, it became all business, and it's as all businesses that go public, that's when the politics start, unfortunately.
Were you and
It's,
Vince close at all though, or friends, or not really?
I think we were absolutely friends. But he's a difficult man to be friends with. I mean, first of all, he's being jerked around in 5,000 different directions. And it's just not his way. And couple that with it's not my way to be casual friends. Uh, I don't have a lot of friends, but the friends I have are very close, uh, intimate friends. We know our lives. We support each other. We keep in touch, and I just can't do the cocktail party talk or the tough guy friends where you're I don't know, where you're not really in touch, but it's like, yeah, John's my brother. Yeah. When did you speak with him last? 8 years ago. You know,
Right.
Well, he's not a very close brother then. Um, so I'm that way. Vince is, uh, well, Vince is a very emotional guy, but um, I, I think it's a combination that's really just not his way to have those kind of friendships. And I don't know, it's also my observation in numerous experiences in my life. When people get really, really wealthy and really, really successful, they get really, really guarded. Um, and I think part of that is logical and necessary. And I think part of it, it just goes with the success thing that you're kind of playing the role in a way of, I don't have time for this. I'm only operating at this level. I can't be down here, which is too bad because they miss a lot. So yes, at least from my perspective, I absolutely think Vince and I were friends, but at the same time, I haven't seen him since around Christmas 2017, and we haven't spoken a word. So, and at the same time, if I ran into him, it probably, my guess would be that it'd be like nothing happened.
Did you know he was retired?
Yeah, I read the papers.
Okay,
And
I wasn't because I know you don't pay too much attention to wrestling. Yeah, okay.
yeah, who knows what the hell's going on? It's the interesting thing about the world of wrestling is, um, it's a scripted thing, and there are lots of times that I had to question, is this real life or is this scripted? I mean, where are we here? So I don't know. It certainly sounds like, um, he had a real problem going, and he had to leave.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe it was a way to retire and pass the company on. And geez, John, there's so many possibilities. It's also possible that the guy retired, but he's absolutely running the company every bit as much from a secret room in the basement.
Right.
Who the hell knows?
It's funny.
It's a bit of a crazy world for sure.
Yeah. It's funny though, the stock went up and the ratings went up. So maybe maybe it's a smart move to move along and because the business boomed after that. So maybe it was smart.
Did it really?
Yeah. Stock is up to I think $76, way up from I think it was at $60.
Wow.
And the ratings were a little bit up. I think it was like 2 million went to 2.2 million and another show was basically 1.5, 1.6 went up to 2 million and kind of football's back, so it kind of sporadic, but they were doing a lot better.
Yeah. Hey, maybe it was a move to boost the ratings.
Yeah, smart. Yeah. He knows what he's doing. With him though, is he the person that tells you like, "Hey, here's a responsibility. You got to create all these legendary theme songs," or is that like a Kevin Dunn or somebody else? Like, who kind of tells you, like, "By the way, we got this new guy, the Undertaker, needs an entrance theme." Like, how does that process go?
Kevin mainly was my conduit for information, and but many times I would meet with both of them, and we'd be talking through characters. Um, it was I liked when it was Vince because Vince and I connected on an emotional level where I could feel I felt I could feel more easily, rather than trying to describe. It's very hard to describe music. I mean, I can say, John, I really want you to write something that's uh, sad, but not too sad, but also has an element of danger. It's like, wow, you know, I could write you 30 different pieces that are sad with a little element of danger, but the range of those pieces would be really broad. It's more about, and a question I ask many times of a lot of people is, what do you want to feel when you hear this piece of music? With Vince, I could always feel it better. Just something about, I think just that was the very positive wavelength that he and I were on, which is not to say that I couldn't feel it with Kevin, but um, just a little bit less so.
With guys like The Undertaker, for instance, it's just one of those themes, like you said before, you hear the gong, if you will, then you hear the song. But man, it just fit him perfectly, but it is so legendary. Almost sometimes can give you like a goosebump feeling because you're like, whoa, this is eerie, especially when they do when Kevin Dunn, they do the lights and the production and stuff, but it's
Yeah.
almost like you get like an eerie feeling, but it's like, man, this is so cool. It's a weird kind of vibe, but it's like, wow, this guy again fits this song. When you hear it, you think of this giant, redheaded man that's undead or whatever you want to call him.
Yeah, that was a lucky one. Wow. And I think it's the I don't know, the contrast or dichotomy. I don't quite know what the right word is because it's he's such a massive, uh, dark, uh, mystical, ominous, dangerous character. Um, I always thought it was interesting that even when he was a complete baby face, there was something dark and like evil about him in a way. That it was that whole mystical thing really worked, or he made it work. Um, he was never like a happy-go-lucky. Oh, I'm the good guy. I'm coming in to save the day. There was always an element like you didn't quite know. You had your hopes about what you thought was going to happen, but you never really knew. And the theme when I wrote it was just a uh, absolute gentle, I think, beautiful child's theme. Not something that you think would go with a guy like Undertaker. And yet, as soon as I played it, that was one of those things is like, and that when I had difficulty coming up with something um, because he is such a mystery. I mean, he's, you know, I, when I first saw a little bit of footage of him, he's a huge guy and he's dark and the big long black leather jacket and the hat, and you can't really see his face, and he's got the dead guy or undead, whatever the heck that means. Um, so at first I'm thinking like, big, powerful, like boom, power chords, and I thought it just cheapened him so bad. It's like that's not who this guy is. This guy is from a different place. This is just an entirely different thing. He's not a wrestler. He's from a different world or something. And I kept plugging away, and then it came up with that little gentle theme. And as soon as I played it, I said, "Wow, that's so screwy, but that's it." And so I knew it couldn't be the way I wrote it because that was just uh, on the piano. But um, so then I thought, okay, well, so then it's got to be on a gigantic church organ, and um, with a choir, and then after I wrote it, I needed something to start it off, and so thought of the bell, and but how can I design a bell that sounds like the biggest bell in history, and big, low bell? So it designed a bell sound that fit. So
What an iconic song. I mean, still, I mean, he doesn't really wrestle anymore. He's retired, but when he does come out or do appearances stuff, you still have like that aura, that mystique. The theme just goes perfectly with him. It's crazy how perfect it fit.
is he still around? Does he still do shows?
So he does this one man show, like when they're in town and they have like a big show, he'll do like a one man show where he's kind of telling stories and stuff, but he doesn't wrestle anymore. He retired, I think it was 2 years ago at WrestleMania.
But does he ever come out to the ring anymore?
I'm trying to remember the
Just do a
last. Oh,
walk on, or
the Hall of Fame last year when he came
yeah,
out. They did the whole thing. He came out with the hat and everything, and they lowered the
the
lights, and
line,
so he did it, and he came through because there's a bunch of wrestlers. He came through the wrestlers and out. It was cool, very cool. But of course, they played his theme song, and
yeah,
then he took off the jacket and the hat. And he was wearing rather regular, nice suit or whatever. But
yeah.
yeah, he basically did the whole gimmick.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's we used to have discussions that, not a lot. I guess it'd probably be more I had discussions, and maybe this is a reflection of I'm not really a pro wrestling fan, but that one of the difficulties I always thought with the whole product was, what's most exciting is the guys coming out and the entrances,
Yes.
um, and unfortunately, when you bring up the lights and now it's wrestling, it gets hard because there aren't that many guys who are so acrobatic that they can do things that are so stunning that you go like, oh my god, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Um, so it's all about the stories and the characters, and yet the in the most bizarre way, the lion's share of your product is guys wrestling, which is not all that compelling. And quickly, you can feel in the crowd, or I used to feel it, that they're looking forward to who's going to be the next person coming out.
Yep. That theme and that entrance, that's so key
The
and so
lights and
vital. Yep.
all the noise, and yeah.
That production, yeah. As we hit the wind down here, we head towards the finish. Just a couple quick hitters. Do you have a favorite theme that you've created?
I don't, John. There's so many. There are so many, and I guess it's like any other music. If you ask me what my favorite song to listen to in the car is, it's going to change every other day. So um, probably most of the ones that you and everybody likes, or I've got a few. Probably wild cards that just, for some bizarre reason, I get a kick out of. Sort of lesser known things.
Survivor Series Deadly Game for me. That's one of the weird ones that I love.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite songs I've ever written.
Love that. And just I don't know, like it's one of those like wrestling themes sometimes you can't listen to it. I could actually listen to that like away from wrestling. I don't know, I just love that song. It's so catchy to me. I just like
Well,
it.
and I didn't. That's I love to hear you say that, and it's astute of you to say that, because I didn't write it for wrestling. Just something came up for a pay-per-view, a request, and I remembered that song, and I said, like, this might work. And they said, that works. So we used
Awesome.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that song. And it's, it's definitely one of those songs. There's this dynamic after you write something, or I've spoken with other writers where this is the same dynamic for them as well. And I've certainly read about many composers that have the same dynamic, is after you're done with something, it's sort of like it's a child, it's been born, and um, it's out there now. And when you hear it, it's like you hear it like everybody else. There's not, you don't hear it with ownership attached. It's not like it's not like I listen to Deadly Game and go like, oh my God, boy, Jim, you nailed it on that one. You know, that's a great song. Good job. It's just like, I really love this song
Yep.
with no connection to having been the writer of it.
Great.
It's amazing dynamic because I've had it happen where I've been in an arena, hear something start to play, someone come out to the ring and say like, that sounds really cool. Whose music is that? You know, I'm almost a little threatened, like, where did this come from? You know? And
Yeah.
then it takes me about 30 seconds to go, oh, that's yours.
Right.
But at first it doesn't register at all.
Crazy.
Strange.
Two-parter for me here. Should you
But
be in the Hall of Fame? I'll answer that part. Yes. Second part, would you want to be in the WWE Hall of Fame?
wow, that's a tough one, John. You know, it's there. You know, life is a little weird in that um, though we would like to, uh, oftentimes when things happen, you can't really take them back. The fact is they happened, and um, some things happened towards the end of my time there, and uh, basically getting dumped by Vince. You know, that hurt, and so somehow going back in and being in the Hall of Fame, you know, I'm of two minds. Is like, on one hand, relative to other people who've gotten into the Hall of Fame, it seems pretty weird that I haven't been asked.
Yep.
And at the same time, um, I know the way I feel about it, and it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, for whatever reasons that I would think would be pretty bizarre, but that there's no explaining the way people feel. They could have decided like, well, no, we're not letting that son of a bitch in the Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
I mean, who knows? I don't know.
Right.
You know, but for whatever reason, I haven't been asked. So
Weird. Yep.
it's that's a weird thing. I mean, even if they asked and I said no, and I'm not in the least um, saying that or suggesting that is like, oh, that would be my goal. I want to be asked so I can say no. You know, that would be my way of getting back at them. That's not it in the least. It's, you know, they're just along the way. There certainly have been people who have been asked and entered that I thought like, wow, they're in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that you sort of bring down the credibility of. I mean, the Hall of Fame should be hard to get into.
Yep.
You know, and so that in the future, anyone who does get asked, it has meaning. You know, it really has meaning. So I don't know. It's an interesting question.
What do you think is kind of your legacy? Because obviously you had over 10,000 pieces of music written. I mean, legend, all these awesome theme songs. You've worked with legends. What do you think is like a legacy? If somebody said years from now, like, oh, Jim Johnston, what do you want them to think of? And what do you think that your stamp will be that you left behind?
Uh, Geez. Well, I certainly hope a good composer shows up in that list.
Right.
Um, I, I guess, John, things that are important for me are that the people I worked with have a memory of me like he was a good guy. You know, he always treated people politely and respectfully, and you know, was not a arrogant, conceited idiot walking around the facility like he owned the place. So the that tends to be much more of what drives me in my life than um, other what I would consider more superficial stuff. I
Before
hope I hope people remember those times really as happy times, fun, and that I brought a lot of people a lot of enjoyment. That would be good.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you're tied into some of those huge names that we just mentioned, and that's an emotional response. I mean, and people think of it, and it's like a good feeling. You know what I mean? It's just like, wow, as soon as you hear that song, you're like, it could bring you back to WrestleMania or hanging out with your dad and your
Yeah,
friends or whatever. I mean, it to me, it's one of those things like, oh, that was awesome. Like just thinking about Steve Austin's music hits and having that reaction, but you are kind of, the guy partially responsible for that reaction. Obviously, a lot to do with Steve too, but you're partially responsible for those reactions.
yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I was glad to be part of it, particularly with some of the guys, and Steve certainly one who was always just a real straight up guy with me, very gracious, creatively sharing when we did a few projects together. Um, Always incredibly gracious and um, thanked me for writing his music and knows what the contribution was. So I can't say enough good stuff about him. And Mark too, Undertaker. Um, Interestingly, it's not a long list. Um, and maybe that's a function of the whole being a pro wrestler thing, is that you have to be so in your own world, in your own head, and kind of believing this character and believing I'm the coolest guy in the world, I'm the most powerful guy in the world. I don't know, maybe there's an aspect to it that's like method acting, but I know there's something in that culture where there's this power thing where you don't want to give your power away, and to do things like say thank you or be gracious is to give up your power. And I happen to be someone who thinks that's one of the most ludicrous concepts that's ever been devised, because I think it's the opposite.
So before we let you go, though, is
Yeah,
there any social media, any plugs you wanted to get out there? I don't know if you do much of that, but
I don't really. I don't. I'm redoing my website, and when it comes back up, which will probably be in about 2 weeks, I'm going to have some new music on there, and it's I guess I'd love people to listen to it, listen with an open mind because, for the most part, they're definitely not entrance themes. It's a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd love to know what people think.
All right. Jim, thank you so much for all the time today. It was an honor for me. Really appreciate all the time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been good. It's been fun.